Most guys who have ever restored a car will tell you half the fun is the hunt. So ever since I was a kid and I would round up a car and make a deal on it, I always would take my time after getting the car and figure out where was it sold new, who owned it, where's the motor if it's gone, where's the transmission if it's gone. Today it's not just about the fun of it, but can also add to the value of the car. I know from the original fender tag that the car was built on February 24th, 1971. It was built in Hamtramck, Michigan. The VIN tells you that. I also know that it was wrecked on July 5th, 1980, and that was the last time the car was ever on the road. When I talked with Jerry, the young guy back then that wrecked the car on July 5th, 1980, the way he described it was he had ran into some buddies of his in another town when he was over getting refreshments, and on the way back they were driving a Ford F-150 pickup, an older one, pre-70s, and he was driving the Cuda, and they were playing leapfrog like we always did as kids, you know, hopping back and forth in front of each other. The truck was in front, the Cuda was behind as they came out of a corner. They come out of the corner, the Cuda went out around the Ford truck to get in front of it, got on the soft shoulder, overcompensated, spun around in front of the truck went past. As the truck went past, he remembers looking at the guy in the passenger seat of the truck with pretty big eyes as he went backwards into an embankment, crushing the left quarter, shot it across the street to the other embankment, and bounced it back into the middle of the road where it came to rest with no axle underneath it. Jerry told me that up until 2 years ago, the gouges in the blacktop were still there before the highway department repaved it. So we all piled in the truck, drove out to Junction City, drove out from there to Monroe. And so we found the original highway that it was wrecked on, and we reenacted how the accident happened and where approximately it would have came to rest in the middle of that highway. All of the facts added up specifically and exactly to the way the guy who wrecked the car said that it happened. After a little bit of research, we've narrowed it down to this stretch of highway. Somewhere in this very footprint right here is where that car came to rest. We got back in the truck, loaded the guys up, and the next stop was going to be try to find Jerry's dad's house where the Cuda sat. We had gotten some resistance and some pushback from Jerry on that in earlier conversations, not sure why exactly, but that day I was able to get hold of him on the phone and talk with him at length, and he had said it was okay to go on up there, gave us a description of where the dad's house was, and all of us managed to pull up to the dad's house in the truck, and he was out front. His name was Bob, a super nice guy, and this was a great field trip. I think anything that had gotten pulled onto that guy's property in the last 50 years was still sitting there.
Bob, you got cars everywhere.
Oh yeah.
What is that?
That's Lafayette.
Huh.
Oh my gosh. There were cars as far as you could see, and there were some pretty cool cars there.
The 40 Chevy Standard and the 36 Chevy Standard.
Wow.
49 Dodge pickup.
We were walking up the hill when Bob said, yeah, this is where that Cuda sat all those years after the wreck, because apparently 2 or 3 years while it was getting picked apart, it sat there. And as I was walking along, I said, so literally right here, and he says, yeah, except it was going this direction, which I think was north and south. And I looked down on the ground, and here is this piece of orange twisted up sheet metal. And I'm thinking, no way.
Right
Son of a gun, look at that.
Almost 30 years.
July 5th, 1980. I bend down, I pick it up, it's the lower core support out of the car, cutting the exact same edges as the upper one, which I have, with a torch. But what's crazy is it's nearly 30 years later, that piece of metal was sitting there where the car was, as was the power steering pump with the front pulley, with the power steering pulley caved up against the housing, still sitting there. I asked Bob if anything else had been sitting there, and he said, no, absolutely not. So we were real excited to find that. Later, when we were up there, Bob went into the barn and brought out an axle shaft. That's the original, I'm gonna bet, left-hand axle out of the Cuda. So the results of our treasure hunt were a left-hand axle, a power steering pump, and the lower tie bar out of the '71 Cuda. I would consider that a very valuable, worthy day. Thank you so much for opening up your home and place to us. It's priceless time. If you ever clear the place out and come across something orange, you know who to call. Part of restoring the car to me is knowing where it started. They say what is past is prologue. I believe that. Filling in those gaps, knowing where the car started life, knowing who all owned it. And I think anybody who's ever picked up an old antique at an antique store, one of the things that's fun is finding out where did it come from, who made it, where did it spend its life. So the find, the history, the research, that's the best for me. I think by the time the car is restored in a year from now, this should be pretty much full of black ink and a lot of great memories.